Hello and welcome back to DriveDriverDriven. I'm Humble and we're back on the Blunicorn again, doing more body prefit. Last time we covered the rear clamshell and I had some issues with fitment, and after talking to Jeff, going a little bit back and forth, he sort of gave me the cheat code, the quick and easy way to do the rear clamshell, and so I'm going to share that with you guys. If we look down below, you see where the body comes down on either side, and that's right next to sort of where the pivots are located, which is up in here on either side. Now the easy way to do it is you support the whole rear of the clamshell with a long 2x4 or 2x6, something like that, and use a jack to level out the rear clamshell. And then once it's level, you can quickly adjust its height up and down from the rear pivot back here. And then it helps to have an extra pair of hands to pull this clamshell forward and help close this gap. And what you'll notice is it'll pivot sort of on this nub here. And these are sort of rubber nubs that screw into the body, and I didn't put these in before, but Jeff recommended putting these in first and then setting up your rear pivot. So I went back, installed these rear nubs, or the rubber nubs all over, and like I said, as I noticed, as you raise and lower the back here, it tends to pivot on this one, which is where it rests on the side pod, and then that causes the upper portion and the forward section here to go up and down. That's Kumo defending us from a bag of soil in the neighbor's yard. By adjusting the rear height up and down, we can set how this rests up and down, and then it'll also close the gap closer or farther away up here. And once you have that gap set and you're happy with it, these heims, you'll leave everything disconnected and loose, like loosen these bolts that set it in, and then undo this bolt here. And then once you're happy with your gaps and everything up front, put this pivot bolt in first, and then tighten these kind of capture nuts on either side of the mount here, and then that'll set the position of the rear clam, and pretty much guarantee you can get it within 2 or 3 tries, if even that much. I think we had it after 2, and that was way easier than I was trying to do it, which was to adjust one side at a time and fiddle with it and everything, and that just wasn't working out. And what took us a couple hours on the first day of getting these set up, we were able to do within about 15 minutes using the method that Jeff suggested. So huge thank you to Jeff for that. So now that we got the rear clamshell set, and the center tub is more or less set in position, what I wanted to do is work on the doors and just continue to work my way forward on the car. Originally, I thought that the doors were going to be easier than the nose. I think the nose might be a walk in the park compared to setting up the doors. I've already set up the driver's side, and that'll allow me to show some of the pitfalls that I ran across when installing the door, and then we'll get the passenger side done for you guys so you can show how I adjusted, where I adjusted, and as I did it. So this is the driver's side door in place. You can see the gap is still pretty close down here, and it can be shaved down a bit. It looks good down in the corner, looks pretty good all the way up and around here. It's a little tight on the back of the door, and this can be opened up. And then as we come down, it looks good through the handle area, and then over the edge here. And then again, it's a little tight down here, but it's good enough for now. We can do final fitment once everything is in for final assembly, and what we'll do is we'll just sand this edge down a little bit and then retrim it, or repaint it, or what have you. But there's a trick I'm going to show you on that later. But for now, when you open the door, what you're looking for is you don't want any binding. And sort of the gotcha areas for binding are, they're going to be right up in here. As you close the door, you can see how close that comes to the body. And the trick is when you're filing this, you need to be careful not to grab the body here. That's just some tape residue. But you want to file this edge sort of back at an angle like this so that you'll clear the rounded profile back here. And as you can see, it's really close, but there's no rubbing. And then likewise at the rear, over here on the door gasket, this flange sticks out quite a bit. And you just need to shave that back until this edge clears that jam. So again, we're very close, but there's no rubbing. And then the last thing is setting up this door pin for the lock mechanism. So right now it's a bolt, and we'll shave it down, and I'll show that process later. This is just turned around so I can get the right distance. And as you can see, it's very tight, but again, no rubbing, nothing like that. And then the lock mechanism engages just fine. We get that double click. And it's all good there. So I had some problems with the pivot. Again, something I'll address with the other side. I had to widen this hole out, and then the actual pivot bracket assembly, or the pivot itself, didn't really line up with these holes, so it took a little bit of widening and fiddling. Likewise, with the holes that are up here under the door, they take some fiddling as well. And once you're happy with this, you'll actually drill through and rivet this plate into the door, which will sort of lock this position into place. There's places where you can adjust that are easy, and places where you can adjust that it's kind of more fine-tuning and stuff. So like setting this early, you could put washers behind this assembly on the other side of this panel, and it moves the pivot forward into the car. And then by doing that, it closes this gap here because it pulls the whole door forward. You just want to close this gap enough, and then by pulling the door forward, it'll affect this pivot as well. This pivot has an adjustability to it. You can see it's got threads, so you can wind this heim joint in and out, which moves the door. It pulls it in this way or moves it back this way. To a point, because then these pivots will hit the door when you open it. And then likewise, this area here can sort of move in and out on the side pod. And then again, I already mentioned adjusting this area where the seal sits. So this is the finished product, the driver's side. Now we can attack the passenger side. I'm not too worried about this stuff here. I'm not too worried about the inside of the door, if I can open it. Stuff like this, and then stuff around the edge. We'll address this and clean this up later. There's a neat trick that I'll show you to basically make this look brand new. What the factory does is, after their pre-fit, they'll sand everything to a nice finish, and then they repaint the inside of the door with sort of like a matte black or a flat black. I hadn't done that previously, but I found another trick to help make this sort of sanded edge look quite a bit nicer. Again, this is just the pre-fit. We'll readdress the doors for their final fitment later, but we're just trying to set these gaps right now so we're happy, and then we can start the final assembly later. So first up with the doors is we need to get the door pivot installed in the body, and I'll show you what it looks like from the start. This is what we're starting with, is the door pivot area. You have little 1/8" holes pre-drilled, and then you have this slot that's sort of already made. I've already attacked this with the file. Usually it's a little bit narrower, but what you need to do is just make sure that our nice new door pivot can slide easily through there, and that you have a little bit of wiggle room left and right. So you just need to file this out a little bit. Not all that much, just a hair, just enough so you can get that pivot, enough room to move. Next up, like I said, with these holes, they're pre-drilled with like an 1/8 inch drill bit to set their location. What you can do is sort of take your pivot and install it backwards to double check your fitment and make sure that, you know, everything lines up the way it should. And so it won't line up exactly, but it'll be close. And what I noticed on the other side is when you drill these out, you can drill them a hair over the bolt that goes into it, and that'll allow a little bit of wiggle room on the pivot. And again, you don't need too much side to side or up and down in this area, but by over drilling the holes and then using some washers, it gives you a little bit of play to set the distance here around the door later on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and that's it. Next, we're going to pre-fit the hinge and test fit inside. Now on the hinge itself, if you notice in this area, this one hasn't been modified, but I pulled out my other hinges. This is for the driver's side, this is the passenger side. And on these, if I can turn it around, you'll notice it's been ground down in this area up here and a little bit here, and that's to fit inside this corner. Now on the driver's side, I had to grind off quite a bit to get this to fit. And you can see on this one, the Jeff, I'm sure at the factory, has also been the one to ground these down as well, again for fitment. So I'm going to test fit this inside now, and then we might have to attack this with the grinder just to make it fit down in the corner here. Here is the trimmed hinge. You can see by the profile here on this edge that trimmed it by quite a bit. And again, if I sort of hold this up here, it's backwards, but this area here is up in this corner here. And so you can see, if we turn this around the opposite way, how that's not really fitting up in there in its original state, but when we trim it back, it'll fit just fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this hinge in place, and something I'm going to do first off is on the other side, I had to put one washer on this side, on the back side of this panel here, to space the hinge forward. And I'm going to just start with one washer behind this panel and see where that puts this gap when we install the door for the first time. Chances are you might need more than one washer. On the previous Evo, on the Blunicorn, the body required actually 3 of these washers to pull the door forward far enough. So, but on the other side, on the RS body, it only required 1 washer. So I figure we'll just start with 1 and then see where it goes from there. Before we do that, I'm going to assume that if you're building this car for the first time, you don't actually have an extra set of hinges. And what we're going to do is we're going to drill the holes for this guy here in the door panel, and we can use sort of the door mount here to verify that the holes are the correct bolt spacing. All right, pardon the other noise from construction next door, but it is what it is. So I've already sort of pre-marked these with a silver Sharpie. So this is the sort of crosshair and a little center punch that they do at the factory to set these holes. And what we can do is take our hinge and just eyeball it, and it's pretty close, but you can see that the bolts are a little far off, so we can offset these a little bit. Again, we're gonna have to do some adjustment on how the door fits using these holes here, and there's a panel that goes in place, which is this guy that sits over this part of the body. So what you'll inevitably end up doing is drilling these holes actually quite large to not only fit the bolts, but to allow movement like up and down and in and out, again, to help set this corner in relation to the body on the front part of the center tub. And then when you are finally happy with your fitment and everything's bolted down, you actually rivet this panel in place on the door to set your final position. On the back side of this panel, you can either copy this out of like aluminum or something, or you can use large fender washers to help spread the load on the inside of the panel. There's multiple ways to help kind of spread the load from this hinge over the inside of the door, but either way, you can sort of hide your crime, so to speak, with this panel, and you don't have to worry about the size or the location of the holes here too much. So let's go ahead and drill those out. Now, as you can see, they're much larger than they need to be, but again, that allows us some movement here when we're fitting this and fitting the door up. And then again, once everything is settled, we rivet this plate in place, and that'll set our final position. So now let's get this hinge assembled in the body with the door to begin our pre-fit. Quick little note I wanted to make up as I was fitting this in is this is a good chance to install the gas ram that's going to hold this hinge open. In fact, you need that when you're pre-fitting the door so that this hinge will stay open while you're futzing around. This end is easy enough. The ram has just a threaded section that screws into the heim joint here. On this end, there's this little band that captures a ball stud that sits just right here on the chassis itself. And all you have to do is move this band up towards the end. I can't twist it around, but you move it up towards the end, and that'll make it so you can pop it on and off the ball seat nice and easy. And then when you're ready to do the final install, you just move this band down once it's on the ball itself, and that locks this end into position and it won't come off. I just wanted to point that out before I installed it, just because it's easier to see while it's out of the car. First fit of the door. As you can see, we have a little bit of interference back here, kind of a larger gap because of it. Door's not sitting down correctly here, but this gap isn't looking half bad. So I think we're pretty close with that one washer behind the panel here. So I'm going to stick with that for the moment. As you can see, we don't have the pivot in yet up here on top of the door. And the reason is we want to get the door to fit a little bit better first before we worry about this pivot. Basically, I had to do this on the driver's side too, and it's this area right here is just tight, and we want to shave this back, just sand it back a little bit until the door will sit down flush against the weather seal. Now, speaking of weather seal, this wasn't installed before, so I just had to pop it on really quick. It's a little tight going on the first time. Once it's been installed, it will go on a little bit easier the next time. So far, I'm not having any interference fit here and here, which means I probably won't have to shave this flange down like I did on the driver's side. We'll see. Once the door's a better fit and it closes a bit tighter, we'll see if I have to do that or not. But one of the things I forgot to mention before is when you're setting the center tub in place and bolting it down and making sure that all your surfaces are flush here and here, you want to go side to side and measure this distance from the corner here to the corner here, and get those as close as you can for the door opening. In my case, this opening is right about 29 inches from the edge of this to the edge of that. And I tried to get that as close as I could from side to side so that the doors would be even from side to side, or they wouldn't need as much work from one side to the other. As you can see, we just have some washers, again, kind of covering up our crimes here. I had to widen this out just a little bit more so it would clear on the hinge. I might have to touch it up a bit more on this side here. but otherwise that's looking good. The hinge itself is tight, but the bolts in the door here are just tight enough that I can move the door just around a little bit until I can set its final position. Again, I'm not too worried about that until we set our top hinge and then set our final fit. And then once I'm happy with that, we can pin this gold plate in place to the fiberglass, and that will set its final position. So next up is we're gonna do the messy job, and we're gonna mark and start shaving the door down until we get a good fit here. All right, so missed out on the time lapse because somebody's battery died, and we won't say who. I can show you the areas I had to touch up. So starting with the door closed here, I had to clearance this area down in the corner. I had to clearance pretty much the whole way under the door here up until about this point. I still haven't finalized this until I put the striker pin in. I had to do a little bit up in here. I still have a little more to go. And up here by the hinge, I had to do quite a bit here, just where the hinge is, and then down in this area, I could probably do a little more, just so that when it's opening and closing, it clears the A-pillar a bit better. But other than that, it's a pretty good fit. The single washer spacer, same as the other side, worked really well up here. So I think I'm going to stick to that. Next up is our striker plate assembly and latch mechanism. So that'll fit up in this area. Probably this side as well as the other side. I'll need to clearance this opening just a little bit. Down here, I've already drilled the hole for the striker pin. On the other side, I had to widen it a little bit so I could make its position adjustable to get a nice flush shut line when the door was latched. So I'll probably end up doing the same here. When it comes to the striker pins, so this guy on the left I've already trimmed up and it's ready to go in. This guy on the right, this is the bolt as they come. And what you do is you need to figure out how long the shank needs to be. When it sticks out of the body, it's just this nut on the door side, and then on the back side you'll have a lock nut and washer that help position its length. But you need to figure out how long the shank needs to be to catch the door mechanism and then not interfere with the door itself. Previously, when you saw it, it was flipped around this way with the threaded end sticking out, and that's how you find how long the shank needs to be, is you feed it from the back side and then adjust the nuts to show its protruding length from the door sill area. And that's what I'm going to install now. Okay, so here it is installed in the latch area. You can see there's quite a bit protruding here, and I bet when I try to shut the door it's going to interfere with the edge, and it does. So what that needs to do is we need to pull that back just a little bit by loosening the nut on this side and then tightening the nut on the back side. And then when we go to shut it again, just a little bit more. And now you can see it just clears. So that's a good length to start with. You can always start longer and make it shorter when it comes to your final fitment. So for now, we're going to leave this as it sits, and we're going to install the latch mechanism. Our latch is set up. Now, these are both areas that you can use to sort of cheat and fit the door, the last little percentage for a good fit. By elongating the hole, either up or down or in and out here, and elongating these holes for our latch here, I had to move it this way, up and down, and then lock it back down. But using both methods, you can make sure that when you close the door, you have a nice shut. And what you're looking for is you want it to click once, and that'll lock it like sort of halfway, and then a second click is locked and it's all the way down. Fit isn't perfect, but I'm happy with it as it sits because there's one more addition we need to make. But it's a little off here, but otherwise down on the bottom of the door is good. This corner is good. This corner is a little tight. I can knock it down a little bit more, but otherwise all the way up here is good. The last addition we need to make is to grab our roof scoop and put that on, because chances are we're going to have to clearance the tops of the doors here, and then the edges of the doors, the corners back here, and you'll see why in a second. I'm trying to rush because I'm running out of daylight here, but there's a couple things I want to show you with the roof scoop proper. It just sets on the middle of the center tub here, and you have a little bit of adjustability forward and back, which is hard to do one-handed, but right now it's all the way forward. Usually you might have some fitment issues up here in the corner on the edge, but as you can see, it clears just fine. And on the other side, up here on the door, it's tight, but it's clearing. On the other side, same thing. It was a little tight up here, and I had to remove some material from the edge of the door. I should probably remove a little more just to be happy, but it's looking okay here. And then likewise, you can see there it's a little tight and it rubs here, so I'll have to clearance the edge of the door there, but only a little bit. The last thing to check is when you lower the clamshell, you want to make sure that that clears the lip there. And then when it's all the way down, you're going to expect to have a gap here. That's perfectly fine. It's just when everything's sitting nice and tight. I'll probably have to do one more refit of the rear clamshell just to close up this gap a little bit better, but I'm pretty happy with that fitment so far, just ever so close. For attachment points, the center scoop has these lips that come over on the edge of the door, and it's just a couple of rivets, one in the front, one in the back. You'll just drill in and rivet to the center tub, and then underneath this guy there's a piece of black vinyl, because if you can, well, it's hard to tell, but underneath this thing, well, I can't lift it up, but underneath it, it's just open in the middle, so you'll be able to see the body color. So there's a piece of black vinyl that goes down to sort of black that out, so you can't see the body color underneath. Last but not least, we got our striker pins in. Everything clears well there. So on this side, it's close but no touching, and we get a nice positive lock. Same thing on the other side, and there you have it. One final look with the doors up. I still haven't fit the door latch mechanism. I'm going to save that for the final install, because all that has to come out anyway when we paint and seal the doors. Something else that will be coming up in the future. We're about 2/3 of the way. The last chunk is getting the nose pre-fit and getting that set up. I do have to say that I think the doors are going to be worse than the nose. That was pretty much an all-day endeavor, just getting the passenger side door fit. So that's quite a bit done today. I'm glad you guys stuck through it, but I'm gonna call it a night. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.